Hello and welcome again to Cherry TV. I'm Iain McNay and my guest today is Korda Marshall. Hi Korda.
Thank you.
And we're going to do a new series. This is the first one, and it's an idea I've had for a time, which is looking at some of the key people in the British music industry, looking at their careers and hearing about some stories of how things went and the qualities they needed to get where they got, and how they made their big decisions and how they handled difficult situations, because there's often very many difficult situations you have to handle in a very quick and in your own way. So Korda's the first one, so he's the guinea pig in one way. And he's had an amazing career because he's signed or been heavily involved in Muse, Blow Monkeys, Take That, Ash, Garbage, James Blunt, Niles Barkley, Alt J, The Darkness. That's just some of the bands, and many he signed those himself. He worked his way up at RCA from a junior position to a senior A&R position. He was managing director at Atlantic, managing director at Mushroom Records, and of course had and has his own label, Infectious Records. So we'll look at his career and we'll see where the programme goes.
Thanks.
So Korda, your first gig you were telling me earlier was David Bowie, Hammersmith Odeon, when you were 12 years old.
Yes, amazing show. So it was the first actual gig was the Aladdin Sane tour at Earl's Court, and then the second gig was the Ziggy Stardust show at Hammersmith.
Yeah.
I was 12. And my big sister took me along. I'd heard the Aladdin Sane. We got the Aladdin Sane album in the house the day it was released, actually, and just fell in love with it. And it was an amazing experience. And 1972 at Earl's Court, with an androgynous Mr. Bowie on the stage, and everybody wearing makeup, and a lot of crazy Australians. I can remember that. Very bad sound, and it was just an amazing experience.
Yeah.
It's just the star quality just kind of shone through. And my eyes were open, and my mouth was agog. The whole experience was fantastic.
Yeah, it's interesting because I interviewed Alan McGee quite recently, and his bigger early influence was also David Bowie.
Yeah.
And I remember also I went to a very early gig on the Ziggy Stardust tour, and it was Epsom Town Hall.
Oh,
it was
okay,
only it was half full.
Really?
It was before the Ziggy Stardust album came out, and again, it was so different from anything I'd ever seen before. It was just, I think it opened our minds and our ears to a complete new possibility.
I think that performance of Starman on Top of the Pops was amazing, and I think that resonated with many, many different people of our generation when this androgynous thing came on and played Starman.
Yeah.
Amazing talent, unbelievable. I'm a huge fan all over the years.
And then you were a drummer, and you were in a band called the Thin Men at college.
I was. I trained at an art college, did an architecture degree. Not because I wanted to be an architect, but it was a good arts degree. My dad was in the arts, and it was just like getting an A-level in English or maths. It was a good, solid arts degree as a foundation. So we did that, and then at art college I was in a band, and the college band carried on, and that seemed a bit more fun than going to be an architect, so we carried on with the Thin Men, and then that fell apart, and I've joined a band called Zero One, and it's not in 1982, and then we were on tour with The Cure, Peter Gabriel, Echo and the Bunnymen. So that was my first introduction to the kind of to meeting the real world of music and proper gigs and professionals, and meeting managers and agents and publishers and record people. So, and again, I was just eyes wide open, gripping and grinning, making sure I met everybody and concentrating on networking.
And did you think you would make it as a musician, or did you just,
No, I knew I was a particularly bad kind of Ringo Starr style drummer with no timing, if that makes sense. I knew I'd never be Ginger Baker, but I sat at the back of the band and I kind of watched all the things go wrong, and also because I was just a drummer, it was my job to go and to book the gigs, or to make the posters, or to try and get the demos sent out to record labels. So that was kind of my first introduction into being a manager or working in the industry, or trying to get people to hear our music.
And did you at that time have aspirations for a career in the music business?
I'd always wanted to get, from seeing those early shows, or I remember seeing Queen support Mott the Hoople in '74, and watching Queen grow and become successful. In those early Bowie shows, the brochure said David Bowie presented by Main Man, and I was always intrigued in who Main Man was and what Main, and then the more I found out, I kind of discovered that the record companies took 88% and or whatever, and the artists were on 14, 15, 16%, and the majority of the income went to the record labels. And then discovered where everybody sat in the food chain and the manager and what have you. So I knew I wanted to be in the record business or in the music business, whether it was as an agent or as a publisher or as a manager. At that point I was content to be a roadie. Which is, I did roadied for Blancmange and for a couple of other acts and things. It was, really jack of all trades, master of none, just dive in. And then when I left Zero One the band, and was in the middle of the Pete Gabriel tour, I sat down and wrote a large number of letters to everybody that I knew. I went through the Music Week directory, and so I wrote to studios, to management, to record labels, to try and get a job. And it was about 150 odd letters, and I got 6 replies. And one of those was a phone call to say we might have a job as a coffee maker, tape copier, junior in the A&R department in RCA. But they didn't really have a salary with it, and if it was something I was interested in, so I went along and met RCA, and that was £20 a week, bus pass and lunch and vouchers. And I started January '83 at RCA. I was number 9 in a department of 8. As the tape copier, making coffee.
And you were saying again earlier that you had to go for 9 hours of interviews for that.
For that job, yeah, I did.
To be number 9.
I know, I did. Yeah, no, I did. Well, I did have the HR interview, then the A&R person interview, and then a guy called Peter Robinson, who actually gave me the job, interviewed me, and then finally David Bettridge, who was the managing director of RCA at the time. So, I went through all that processes and got the job, and then concentrated on making really good coffee, concentrated on copying all the tapes properly, and went out and saw every single, went and saw three to five bands every night, 6 to 7 nights a week, and just I dived into the whole kind of A&R talent scout and made it my job to know everybody that was playing and connect and find out everything I could about new acts.
And how long did it take you before you felt you had some influence there?
Well, within quite a short space of time, there was a band called the Blow Monkeys that had been signed a week before by a guy called Steve Cutler, and he left the company after he signed the band like a week later. So they were homeless and didn't have anybody looking after them. I knew Dr. Robert because we used to share rehearsal rooms when I was in the band, so it was so I knew them, so I just said, look, I'll help you out. I discovered what's called a PO book. So at RCA, I found a way of running up costs and booking studios on a PO book, and started to work with them, and we got some ideas on how to remix a single, and we took a song called Digging Your Scene to America. We added some recording, remixed it all. I got a guy called Michael Baker. I was trying to get Arthur Baker, but I couldn't afford him, so we got Michael Baker, similar, and he was his engineer at the time and had been around it. So he came in and we remixed and re-recorded Digging Your Scene. I was a talent scout. I spent about £18,000 doing it all, but it became a big hit, and I think that's one of those key decisions. I think if that single hadn't have worked, I probably would have been fired, and it would have been my end of my career. But because I spent a big chunk of money and it actually worked, and it was number 9 in England, number 11 in America, top 20 in Germany, so suddenly people thought I knew what I was talking about. So
you were given the chance to take a risk, and you took that risk at a pretty early stage.
That was in the first 18 months. Yeah. And I was quite, and I wanted to sign. My first actual signing, personally, that I signed was an amazing little lady called Helen and the Horns, in the kind of cowpunk dance. It was all that time of men they couldn't hang and all that cowpunk thing. Yeah. So the first thing I actually signed that was successful myself was a band called Westworld, who had a big hit called Sonic Boom Boy. But the Blow Monkeys were kind of crucial to my career. I made 5 albums. Robert's still a good friend, amazing songwriter, and that's how I really grew up learning about A&R. And then I got to work with Dave Stewart at RCA with Anxious Records, and that's how I got to work out how to work with great artists.
Because Dave Stewart was then one half of Annie Lennox. Yeah.
Well, again, my role as a coffee maker and tape copier. And Dave was very specific, so I used to measure the granules of coffee. I used to get a thermometer and get the temperature of the coffee right. Make sure. So every time I gave an amazing coffee that was exactly how he liked it, and that's how I got introduced into Dave's world. But it's about the detail, isn't it? It's all about the detail. Because the devil's in the detail. But yeah, if somebody sees that you're interested and you take the smallest things you get right, they have confidence in you. Well, we were sitting around talking about things. I think I'd just gone out to get Jimmy Iovine's pizzas in the studio, and we came back, and Dave was talking about the ingredients to make the perfect cup of coffee. Yeah. I just listened, and then I thought, well, I'll give that a go, and so it's the small kind of things. But that's a good example. And I worked really hard. I mean, I was working 14-hour days, opening. I got taught very early, open every envelope, listen to every cassette, get back to them, make a decision, communicate, over-communicate. And I think in an A&R sense, A&R people over the years have got such a bad rap, rightly so. And I thought, when I was 16, I didn't like record companies. I was a punk rocker, watching the Clash and things. So I thought I could change a small little bit of the world that I was in. And in that era, I think I got involved with Psychic TV. I managed to sign Psychic TV to RCA Records.
The famous Genesis PRH. He wasn't easy, was he? He was a character.
He certainly was a character.
Yeah.
Well, I've been blessed to sign, to work with Psychic TV and Peter Andre on the two extremes, and then a whole lot of great musicians and great artists in the middle. But Genesis was great, and he taught me, Mr. Porridge, he taught me a lot about being obtuse, about expect the unexpected, and the whole kind of psychedelic kind of cultural context. But it was fascinating, and I learned a lot. Again, my eyes were wide open. I listened a lot to everybody. I tried not to talk too much, and just took it all in.
Yeah. So, at what stage did you feel, because you had various promotions within RCA, didn't you? At what stage did you feel you were really getting somewhere, and you were really being noticed, and you were being rewarded in terms of getting a fairly senior position?
I think I went from kind of talent scout to junior A&R, then to it was all structured in a kind of corporate sense, which is what they did in those days. So to junior A&R to A&R men, and then to senior. I suppose the point I went out and signed. We had a long conversation with Peter and just internally, and at the time, the label had acts like Bucks Fizz and Dollar and Slade. It was very pop, and had some great artists from America. Lou Reed was on the roster. I met him a couple of times, and Jefferson Starship, obviously historically and what have you. So, but they had no real artists. So I went out and signed the Primitives, big hit called Crash. A band called The Wedding Present. I was infatuated with Gedge, and that first George Best album was amazing. And a crazy bunch of band from Birmingham called Pop Will Eat Itself. Yeah. And the fact that they allowed me to go out and sign those three acts and then work that and make that work, that was quite a key kind of point where I realised I was listened to and I had freedom.
But did you always feel that if you made the wrong decision, your career could start to
a slippery sliding slope? Yeah. I think the solidity came with an act after that, working with Dave Stewart. I looked after Anxious Records with Dave, and there was a band called London Beat. Willie I'd known from Cornwall for a long time, and they were great. They had a big hit. We did a big song called I've Been Thinking About You, which was #1 in 21 countries. And that was the first time where I'd taken a demo, helped them really work it through, and kind of championed a song all the way through the record label that then became a monster hit and was successful all around the world. So I think that was the point where I realised that I was swinging from the I was hanging from the gallows with my hands rather than my neck, and just trying to get to the top in an A&R metaphor. If you spend £100,000 and get it wrong once, you may get away with it. If you do it twice, you won't. So it's like you're like a goalie. A&R department and the A&R man is like the goal scorer in a football team. You have to sign our artists and sell records and succeed. Yeah. And if you don't, you're not there very long. It's
There's
really
a lot
simple.
of parallels with football, because you're absolutely right. In a football team, the manager, you get even less time now than you used to get. Yeah. You've got to get results.
Well, you get 12 minutes at the end of the game now. You're lucky.
And it's the same with A&R man and also an MD at a record company. If you're not bringing in the results.
Yeah. That's true. I was blessed at the time. I was trained and helped by some amazing. So Peter Robinson, who worked at CBS International, worked with the Clash and worked with some amazing acts. He amazing ears and a lovely man. So originally a journalist. He taught me an awful lot in terms of the A&R approach. Working with Dr. Robert the Blow Monkeys, from the means of necessity and trying to making all that work. I learned so much with those guys. The Blow Monkeys really helped me. Editing an 8-minute remix into the single, which was digging or scene, splicing two saxes together. They really helped me in the musical side. And Dave Stewart, really was amazing. So again, I listened a lot and learned a lot through that process, and just tried to kind of sink it all in. And then it is the art and skill of A&R, the project management and risk management. I trained as an architect, so project management was something I totally understood. And risk management is, risk reward ratios, and if you put £100 in, you get £150 back. Yeah, they're really simple, really. It's not that hard, but you have to succeed. You have to be determined, so you have to work really, really hard. And in project management, if you run the project through the company, you can help make it successful. And that's the success of great A&R, is to actually, once you've made an amazing record, is then to make that record successful within the team you're working with.
And you've got to believe in yourself, haven't you? And believe in your decisions.
But again, I was taught very early on, make a decision, even if you get it wrong. Better to make a decision and get it wrong than not make a decision. So I've made some big decisions on the toss of a coin. Self-confidence is really on the toss of a coin. I've made many decisions.
You literally tossed the coin, head sign. Really.
Yeah. Better than not making a decision.
Yeah.
And confidence is important. You know, I mean, there's a very fine line between arrogance and confidence. I love confidence, but based on experience and self-belief and you know, some background and arrogance is a little thin, and sometimes you can be found out. So it's always good to get the balance of that right. But if you are confident in self-belief and that energy attracts people. And I'm stupid enough, you know, if there are 15 people saying red and I think blue, I'll go blue. So that self-belief of going, no, this is we can do this. Let's, you know, here's a hill, we're going to capture it. Let's go and make this work.
You see, it takes courage to do that, because I think we all.
Or blind stupidity is the other.
Well, I don't know.
They're a thin line.
I'm thinking of Steve Jobs, who many times went against his board of directors at Apple and said, "This is what we're going to do. I know it's going to work."
Yeah. The history of my career is normally me going dead against lawyers, accountants, or record execs that didn't know what they were talking about.
Huh.
And I've been fired for those things in the past. You know, I mean, that's if you believe, you have to put your head down and run, and deal with the consequences as they may be.
So at 29 years old, you were made head of A&R at RCA.
Certainly was.
And you had a budget of, you had 10 people reporting to you, an £8 million a year budget, and 32 acts.
Yes.
That was a big jump, wasn't it?
That was a big job. Yeah. Well, I was senior, and I've been working with some bigger artists and working with Dave, and you know, but yeah, that was a big jump, and budget responsibilities, managing staff, the whole kind of process of, and BMG, to be fair, RCA and BMG trained me well over those 10 years. So, you know, the whole context of reading a balance sheet and understanding the context of the finances and looking after staff and looking after artists and, you know, managing so that you're not interfering and delegating things properly, delegation, motivation, correlation, all those kind of things, and coordinating that properly. And I learnt that through a period of making mistakes and getting things right, and hopefully getting things right more than I got them wrong.
But it's a lot of qualities you need. You mentioned about 6 really important qualities there.
Yeah.
And some people may have 1 or 2, but to have all 6 is very rare. To be able to handle budget, handle artists, coordinate, just handle artists in itself. Obviously, A&R stands for artists and repertoire.
Yeah.
And just that side of it is a big.
There's a skill set in how to deal with a young act, how to deal with a stroppy musician, how to deal with a tied up musician, how to deal with somebody who's not writing or is kind of, you know, so the process of how, when and where and how you communicate. But, you know, if you're honest and you're transparent and you're pleasant and you're solid and you mean what you say and you say what you mean, then that level of respect and trust builds up slowly, and you have a relationship, and then they understand that, you know, when you say something you mean it and you deliver it.
You see, this, I always found it interesting. For myself, I had to learn in my early days of running a record label that for me it was about getting friendly with the artist but not getting too close. And I made mistakes sometimes of getting too close. And at the end of the day, the artist is the artist. And you get too close, you can get the right old muddle. Crucial.
Again, I was blessed. I worked with somebody called John Preston for a number of years, who was the MD.
Yeah.
He was one of the MDs at RCA. He taught me loads. I mean, from Greek, you know, he was a very kind of a lovely man, Scottish, and I remember he came in with his bright green shoes, and when we were signing Westworld, that's how we managed to close the deal, because the MD had some funky shoes, you know. So the small details are important, but he's brilliant. So you're learning all those things as you go through.
So you signed Take That.
Yes. Well, Nick Raymond was the A&R manager. Was one of the 10.
But he was responsible to you.
Yeah, I was his director. You know, I was his boss. I brought him into the company.
Yeah.
Somebody else had Take That in before, actually, about 6 months before, and everybody laughed and dismissed it all. And then Nick joined us, and then 3 months in brought Take That in, and we looked at it, and again there was some chuckles and sniggers. We had a 3-track demo. And I never forget this. We had a 3-track demo, and on that there was a song called "A Million Love Songs," And that song was an amazing song. And I remember it was a Gary Barlow demo, really bad sax solo. But we played the 3 songs in the A&R meeting, and I kept going back to that song. So we met them, we went and saw them at the Limelight. Again, A&R, you know, is it the hair on your arms that makes the decision, or is it the process of... I remember looking at them thinking their complexions were fantastic, and their skin was amazing. They were really photogenic, and they could dance really well. Their timing wasn't great, but they could twist and they could turn, and they were obvious dancers. And you know, I grew up with Pan People and Top of the Pops dancers, so they had a couple of good songs. They had Take That and Party, which was an okay song, and they had Million Love Songs. And I could just see, and a lot of the other A&R people, I won't name names, but other A&R, heads of A&R and other labels were throwing things at me and saying, what the hell are you doing signing this? But Nick was passionate about it, he wanted to sign it, so we signed it. We made the record, we spent a lot of money, we put out 3 singles, they all stiffed. I got blamed for the fact that it all stiffed. I spent a lot of money with a company called Deconstruction on a band called M People at the time, so classic major label change of regime. New MD came in, new regime came in, looked at my P&L, looked at what we're doing, and those 2 acts I spent £1.5 million on, so I got fired. And I walked out with, luckily they exercised the option on my contract 6 months earlier in the change, so I still had 2.5 years left on my contract, so I got ceremoniously dismissed from RCA after a 10-year service.
So the way they looked at it was you made 2 major mistakes.
I'd made 2 major bad decisions.
It cost a lot of money each time.
The truth of the politics is that there was a big gap there. There was a lot of money in the hole on those 2 acts. It was an easy blame to me to get me out and bring in their man. That's the reality.
Okay, so it was a political
And I walked away with 2.5 years' salary,
Yeah.
and with that I started Infectious Records.
Yeah.
April 27th, 93.
But just to go back for a second, it's like there's always politics involved, isn't there? In a multinational big organisation. In a small company, hopefully you can minimise the politics.
Sometimes the politics in a small company can be even worse than the politics in a big company. And I got taught, you know, I used to run around the swimming pool. You know, the politics is the swimming pool. I used to walk around the edge of the pool. I very rarely went in the water.
Yeah.
Really, and over years I always tried to stay on the sidelines and just watch. You know, I'd duck out, I'd leave the room, I've got to go make a coffee. I'd say, oh really, when I didn't know what, you know, when I knew exactly what was going on, I didn't know what was going on. It's a real difficult one. And politics are with any team. You know, there's politics there's politics everywhere. If you get a bunch of people together, you're going to get some politics because everyone's got opinions. And if you're a team trying to succeed, you'd expect that. You know, if everybody passionately cares, then you want some arguments and some conversations.
So anyway, so you saw it as a blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
You had
at the time at the time my world fell apart. It was horrendous. But you learn from these things. If I hadn't been fired, I wouldn't have started Infectious.
Yes.
I'm a big believer in making mistakes and moving on. And you know, the world moves, and what happens, and you deal with it. And that happened. And I started Infectious. It was great.
And your first act was Pop Will Eat Itself.
First act was, well, they were still at RCA, and they were unhappy at RCA, so they managed to find a way of getting out of the record agreement with RCA. I won't go into too many details there, but that was quite an interesting context for a book.
Well, you say on your website, so it's public, they were dropped for bad behaviour.
Yes.
So it is out there in the ether.
Yeah, they went into the record company, caused a lot of bad behaviour, got dropped, and then I signed them. So I signed them for £5,000 to Infectious. That was the first signing on Infectious. Yeah. But I knew that we could sell some records, and the first 2 albums had been successful. The first album had been successful, so I knew we could sell some records. So once I had them signed, I could go to a distributor, which I went to see Martin Mills, who was the director of RTM. Yeah. And he said, well, I can't help you with any money or invest in you as a label, but it's great that you've got a label, but what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm trying to raise some finance, and you know, if I'm going to sign Pop Will Eat Itself. Can you advance me some money if I agree to give you the distribution? And he was a gentleman, and he gave me he lent me the first £35,000, right. Martin Mills.
So this is from
beggars.
Where?
This was to Infectious in '93.
No, but I mean...
From a company called Rough Trade, RTM.
Oh, okay, it was RTM.
It was the RTM distribution.
Yeah.
So I had a band, or nebulous, because they weren't talking to each other and it was all a nightmare. There was a lot of drink involved, but they were great. So we had the band, and the manager, Craig Jennings, was lovely. I had 35 grand, which I put that into a bank account. So I started a bank account, got the company limited, and then I knew that Trent Reznor in America was a fan, so I phoned up John Marm, who was his manager, and said, I've got a new Pop Will Eat Itself album. Would you like... Trent had just started a new label called Nothing. He hadn't signed 9 Inch Nails or any, you know, so he hadn't signed and started a whole other thing with Nothing at that time. So we licensed the record to North America. I got $125,000 for that. So suddenly I put that in the bank.
So your experience of how things work, you learned at RCA, was a great start, wasn't it?
Well, and then, really, I took all of the 10 years experience of how to find talent, how to make records and make music, and how to run that through the system. And I used all that kind of very efficient German, Bertelsmann German efficiency, and utilised that in the independent world, and came in with a business plan of some kind of idea that I needed to find some talent, sign it to a company, and then go and sell that around the world to raise some money to put it out. So it's a pretty tried and trusted method. And
explain to people who don't know, the Bertelsmann owned RCA.
They owned RCA, but the Bertelsmann Music Group, BMG Records, BMG, they owned RCA. So I was trained by them for 10 years, and then with Poppies, I got the money just from Martin initially, and then I managed to license it to Jimmy Iovine and Nothing Records in America with Trent Reznor. And then they'd just done a tour of Australia, so I went to Mushroom in Australia, went to license it in Australia, sat down with a guy called Gary Ashley from Mushroom Australia, told him what I was trying to do. The speech was so good, he said, I'm not just going to give you an advance from Australia, I want to finance your label. So I sold him half of my label, Infectious, in the summer. This was about 3 months after starting it. So this all happened in like a 16-week period that summer. So I sold 50% of the business to Mushroom Records, who I just knew from the end of Neighbours on the TV. They had Kylie and Jason. So I thought that was kind of incongruous. And I sold them half the business for £150,000. So suddenly, I had the 35 grand distribution advance, I had $125,000 America, and I had 150,000 joint venture call down fund from Australia. So I was off, and there was me. Pat Carr came in and worked for me as my effectively label manager, but it wasn't such a thing. There was just her and I, and we were all hands on deck. We had a boogie box, we had some note papers. We didn't even have a desk at that time. And we were just kind of sitting on the floor in an office in the King's Road, in the back of a mate's house, in the back of a. So it came from there, and then the Pop Will It Itself came out, and then the plugger on Pop Will It Itself was a guy called Stephen Taverner, and he said, "Oh, I've got this band. I've just found this band. They're amazing. They're teenagers. They're brilliant, but I really like them. They've got this song called Jack Names the Planets, and they come from Ireland at Downpatrick, and." It was actually Paddy's wife, it was the press guy's wife, who told Tav, and she was from the village. So Tav and I flew over to see this bunch of 15-year-olds playing in a church hall, and they were Ash. Right. So I signed Ash. I signed Ash for £12,000, because at that specific time, that was all the money I had in the bank, because I was still waiting for the rest of the money to come in.
Yes.
So I gave Ash all the money I had in the bank, which was quite stunned. Nobody actually said, well, how are you going to afford to put the record out? So we signed that, we made that work. They wrote Kung Fu. They had Girl from Mars, they had Angel Interceptor, and I had to write a letter to the headmasters agreeing not to have a hit before they passed their exams. And then the morning they got their exam results, we were on TVAM on the tour bus, and Girl from Mars was at number 9 in the charts. So suddenly, within a very short space of time, we had Pop Will It Itself selling albums and doing what they did and on tour, and that was brilliant. And then we had Ash rolling through.
So why did it all come together so fast, do you think?
Because we worked really hard, and I planned it well, and I left. As I left one, I took another, and I didn't stop. I didn't go on holiday for 6 months. I didn't disappear. I left RCA on the Friday. On the Monday, I started.
Yeah.
I had a swing hammock in the garden. I bought a very early mobile phone, and another phone that didn't quite work, so I got another phone with a long lead. I sat in the swing hammock with my notepad and just wrote down lists, phoned people.
So you were determined to make it work, weren't you?
I was so fed up that RCA fired me after 10 years.
Not
a gold watch. I didn't get a watch. I didn't get a card. I sold millions of albums for them. I'd signed some big things. I'd worked really well with them, and I just got ceremoniously dismissed out of the office on a Friday night by the security guard. So I had to go back in on the Saturday to pick all my stuff up.
Really? So you got fired one day and that was it?
Yeah.
It's terrible, isn't it?
Well, I got a very large cheque, so it was okay.
Yeah. But even so, it's
I just thought, I can show you lot. What's the most annoying thing that could occur to everybody is me going on having more success.
Yeah.
So we did Infectious. I got Pop Will It Itself. We signed Ash, and then I found a young 17-year-old band in Teignmouth that a friend of mine from Sawmills in Cornwall had told me about, and I went down and they were called Muse. So I signed Muse.
But you'd heard about Matt Bellamy beforehand, didn't you? I think you told me.
Dennis at Sawmills.
Someone tipped you off when he was 14.
He was at school in Devon, and
Yeah.
you know, he was an amazing keyboard player. Actually, he was an amazing pianist.
Yeah.
So I'd heard about him. I was watching him one way.
Yeah.
And one of the things going back to the swing hammock, leaving RCA, was I kind of try to use all the professional context of finance and experience at RCA in the independent world, and I wanted to. I always work best when I've got some ideas around me. So with Infectious, I had a very and Mushroom, I had a very strong. I'd only sign artists under 21 or over 30. I didn't want to deal with 27-year-old stroppy musicians with all the problems that entails. Or, you know, I want a 100 grand video. I want Backpage Enemy. I'll only do top of the all that stuff. So young, fresh, new, bright, which was Ash. When they were 15, Muse when they were 17, a band called Symposium when they were 16. And then artists over 30, where you could have intelligent, articulate conversations. They'd probably been through the mill, they'd dropped a couple of times, so, you know, grown-ups that we can have proper conversations with.
Yeah.
So Garbage, they're all in their mid to late 30s. Paul Oakenfold signed, you know, new from Chelsea. He was certainly over 30. And it was a very clear demarcation that cut the wheat from the chaff. And I was, you know, if the first question I'd say was, how old are they? And if they say 26, I'd just say no. Which really confused the lawyers, confused the managers.
Yes.
Everybody was a bit upset. I really want to come and see Korda. Well, sorry, I'm only looking for artists under 20 or over 30. And they get...
That was a unique approach, I would imagine.
Well, it kind of stirred the water up a bit, made it a bit muddy,
Yeah.
confused everybody. Confusion can be fantastic. It's like change. I embrace change. I embrace confusion. Because as the dust settles, there's a new dawn. You know, so the process of trying to have some ideas. You know, with Infectious.
Confusion, as the dust settles, there's a new dawn.
Yeah.
That's a great phrase.
Well, yeah, it does. Well, it creates a new dawn. Yeah. Well, it does, and a little bit of nervous energy, a bit of friction. So Mushroom, that was the context. With Infectious, with this Infectious, I was in my head. I've been trying to build an imaginary Blade Runner soundtrack album. So every act on Infectious belongs in the movie Blade Runner and on the soundtrack. So if you think of, you know, from Alt J to These New Puritans to Temper Traps to Drengs to Superfood, they all belong somewhere in the Blade Runner movie. That's. I'm always best when I'm working around some kind of philosophy.
What, apart from this age, not limit, but age parameter, what are the qualities you're looking for when you sign a band?
Many different things. Fundamentally, that they're nice, good people, that their heart's in the right place, and that I like them. That I can talk with them. I like them as people.
Yeah.
That's really, really important. Within an A&R context, I mean, A&R is project management and risk management. So the process for me, I'm really looking for three things. I look for an element of musicality or performance. So that, you know, they need to be able to sing really well or play really well, or, you know, there needs to be a strong element of musicality in performance. It doesn't need to be brilliant. You know, Johnny Rotten's a great singer. But it needs to be really good at what it is, if that makes sense. But the second thing, which is really crucial, is the song, composition. I'm a song man. I love songs. I grew up with songs, and that 3.5 minute, you know, the message to communicate the emotions. I've always said we're not selling little bits of plastic as CDs or cassettes or vinyls. You know, great A&R is about selling dreams and aspirations and emotional communication. So the song
you do this
is really
because
crucial.
then the hair rises.
Because the hair on my arm stands up.
Yeah.
And I know Beethoven's Fifth. I learned David Bowie. I learned, you know, when you hear that great music, it has an emotional connection. So I always look for the song. And the third thing, which is slightly more nebulous, which is really crucial, is an attitude.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what, you know, it can be a whisper as loud as a scream, it can be a scream, it can, but just some kind of attitude, some kind of compunction, some kind of desire, some kind of ambition, some kind of thought, some kind of, you know, so that, because there's nothing worse than a dead dodo who's just sitting there going,
waiting for you to do it all for them.
I'm not doing it. I need people who can get up and make things work. So if I get amazing, some kind of musicality of ability to sing, perform, play, you know, a brilliant vehicle to wrap it up in, a song, a tune, a melody, a story, a message, and some kind of context of reasons why, how, where, you know, some kind of context of a background. And if you've got those three things, then there's a whole, you know, on a financial sense, you can add it all up, what it's going to cost. If you sell 50,000 records, if you sell 100,000 records, if you sell what kind of investment you need to make it work. If it's a 7-piece band with an 18-piece orchestra, it's a different investment than an acoustic guitar or a synth band or a pop band or a rock band. So you work out the investment and you analyse all of that in a 2 and 2 is 4, balance sheet numbers equation, and then you look culturally and socially and audience-wise and music-wise, and do they have an audience? Can they find an audience? Will radio love it? Is there an incision point at media? Is there a film soundtrack? Do DJs like it? Are the NME on it? Are they self-motivated? Is it successful in somewhere else internationally? And you look at all of those factors and you put it all together, and then you toss a coin and make a decision.
So meanwhile, you've been made managing director of Mushroom Records after, I think, 3 years.
Yeah.
And that brought you into working with Peter Andre.
Yes.
Who is laughed at often these days, but he had #1 single, didn't he, at that time?
He had loads of #1 singles.
Yeah.
Mysterious. I mean, I was in the room when Mysterious Boy got changed into Mysterious Girl.
Yeah.
I think it might be better if we call this song Mysterious Girl, everybody.
Yeah.
So, simple stuff. That wasn't me, that was the producer who said that. A guy called Molly Meldrum, who was Peter's original A&R record producer in Australia. Peter was brilliant, and all that success created all the money that I spent on Muse, Garbage, Ash, and all those other acts. Peter was an amazing pop star, and he's much maligned.
Yes,
he's had
he is.
3 different pop careers. He had the one with me initially, then he had the second one when we put the same single out and was #1 again after the Jungle, Get Me Out of the Jungle programme.
Yeah.
And then with Katie and all the commercial, he's the sharpest tool in the shed, Peter Andre, and there's an awful lot of pop stars who just have their 2 minutes of fame. He's managed to have a big career. He's kept the money. He took the money to Australia and bought an island, and the family are a great family, and they built a holiday resort out of that. He's had ups and downs and lows. He's a really good man. And so,
yes.
Now looking back, at the time it was much maligned, and he's been much maligned. But creatively is inside of the conversation. It's pop music for young girls. But he's done really well, and he was part of the team.
Yeah.
As was Genesis, Porridge, and Psychic TV at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was an amazing success. That got me into the business side actually, because we had 4 #1s with Peter Andre, huge success, and we couldn't get on the Brits. Couldn't get on the Brits at all. So again, I was like, well, let's get on the BP. Let's go to the forum where the Brits are decided, which is the BPI, the British Phonographic Institute. Yeah. So I found a way of getting myself nominated and voted for on the Brits, just so we could see who was stitching us up, where and why none of the independent acts were on the Brits, and why it was all controlled by Sony and Universal Acts.
Yeah. Just to go back though, you mentioned Genesis Porridge, of course, the band he was in first of all was Throbbing Gristle. Yeah. Did you ever go to a Throbbing Gristle gig?
No, too young. So I've read the books.
Yeah. So extreme. And then
I went to an Einstein New Band gig with the drill, with all the drills. And
things. I was at the ICA. I was at that gig as well. Yeah. But to go from that to Peter Andre, your career
there was a good 6 year. Yeah, there was a 10-year difference.
Extreme than that.
Yeah, there was a 10-year. Hopefully, the things in the middle can work.
Yeah.
But no, Mushroom was really important, and the Australian context, learning about Australian culture, going down there a lot. I was on the board of Mushroom, so a young James Murdoch came into that. So I had James Murdoch in our world. Raucous Records came on board from America because James Murdoch started the hip hop label Raucous.
So that's interesting to talk about. So Rupert Murdoch bought Mushroom. He bought your label Infectious. So you were then reporting to his son James Murdoch.
Yeah.
That's a huge difference in terms of style and.
Well, it's kind of complicated. Michael Gudinski, who owned Mushroom in Australia, he actually sold half of. It's a great story. He sold half of Mushroom. They were going to sell a quarter of it to the Japanese, and then he met Rupert in a lift, and Rupert went, "Don't sell it to the Japs. I'll buy it." So Rupert just paid double and paid half, and bought half of the company, with an option to buy the other half at a mutual option based on success. So Michael just wanted the company to succeed. It didn't really matter what the bottom line was, as long as we grew the top line. So we grew the top line at all costs, and then Michael sold the business, 35, 40 million pounds or dollars or whatever it was, and James Murdoch entered the room, and James was great. We flew to New York and met him, and we put him on the board. He had a label called Raucous, which is a hip hop label. He came in, he was really good, and Raucous was great. I brought in young Max Lusada, who used to work with Raucous. He came in as my
He's now head of
He's
Warner's
now head
UK.
of Warner's. Max is probably one of the best execs best young record execs in the world right now. Actually, he's an amazing track record. I helped him and worked with him. I'd like to think I kind of had an input in what he's doing over the 10 years we worked together. He was great, and so we just kind of put all this thing together. And, finally, we had good resources. We had access into the News Corp world, which is kind of surreal. James was clever enough to leave me alone and let me get on with it. And we built the company, I think that last year we did 23 million turnover. So from nowhere to 23 million in 9 years.
And Muse became huge, didn't they?
Well, Muse at that stage, we were 2 albums in, but that James helped me make a decision to exercise the option on the third record, and we were £1.2 million in the hole, unrecouped.
So after 2 albums,
after 2 albums,
you were still so much in deficit.
Well, the first record at the time had only gone silver.
Okay.
I mean, now it's sold 500,000 records, but at the time it was the enemy hated them, radio wouldn't play them, they were bombastic Radiohead cover band. It was all that. It was pretty vitriolic. So we just carried on, and then we made the second record that had Plug-in Baby on it. It's a pretty amazing album. We toured. We spent a lot of money touring. We spent money making it work. We've made great records. That was expensive back in the day. Eventually we got to the end of the option of the second record to start to pick it up and to go. We were 1.2 million in the hole, and it was a £200,000 option. It was a big decision. If I was in any sane record label with any lawyer or accountant around me, I would have been forced to drop the act. I'd have been made to drop the act. There wasn't a context for going on. Luckily, we sat there with James, and James had just seen them play. They just played the MEN Arena, the East London Docklands Arena. It was quite a small little arena, it was about 6,000 people, but we had a good bill. We made it look good. We pumped it all up. He'd seen them there. He loved the record. So it was kind of, and I just said, we've got to go forward. This is a stadium band. This is an arena act. Yeah. The worst decision we could possibly make was to bail now. It's only money. Let's just carry on, pick it up. So we picked it up.
He took your advice.
And then that third album, went on and sold 4 million copies or whatever around the world, and now they're in enormous domes everywhere. But you see, those are big decisions, and risk and analysing risk, and the accountants and the lawyers would never have taken that risk. And Clive Davis taught me really early on, accountants should add up and lawyers should take instructions, and record companies and music should be run by music and record people.
But he's a lawyer, Clive Davis.
I know, that's the irony of the whole thing. That is the irony of the whole thing. And the world, the music industry is full of lawyers who think they've got musical opinions.
Yeah. But you see, let's look at the qualities that you need there. You need to have courage, because you're keeping going, okay, it wasn't at that time your money, it was the Murdoch family money, but even so, it takes a degree of courage. You've got to have the vision, you've got to have the belief in yourself and your decisions, and
an undying belief in yourself that just kind of go, or a kind of, the other way I describe that is a flippant, nonchalant, not really caring, grab and run, let's just go with it. I'm a big believer in life. If you say yes, doors open and it's a positive affirmation to go forward, and if you say no, then things close and it's a circular thing and it goes round and round and it stops. So I'm always my glass is always half full. I'm a yes man, and it's so much easier to say yes.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at my notes. We're only about 10 minutes left. I want to use the time effectively. So you then Mushroom got the Murdoch sold to Warner.
James got promoted up to run Sky. So James went in to run Sky TV over here. I spent about 6 months trying to buy the company back. I tried to raise 23 million out of investment funds and what have you. That didn't work. So I arranged with a guy called Roger Ames. He bought Mushroom. We brought all my staff and the team of people. I had a great team of people at the time. They all went into a company called East West, which was a division of Warner's. Yes. On that first week, I think I fired 16 people. I went into East West. They had a roster of 14 acts. I dropped 12 of them. I brought 18 of my staff in. I brought
but how do you
8 of my acts in. How do you make
these decisions?
We just sat and went right, bang,
people,
bang,
you're
bang, bang.
dropping acts? How do you decide?
Yeah, well, I knew I wanted all my team in there, and I knew that I wanted the elder people of the team that were there not in there, if that makes sense. And I knew the artists I wanted to keep, and I knew the artists that I didn't want to keep. And we made the decisions quite quickly, and because they hadn't had an MD for 3 or 4 months, it was a nightmare. I'd also been trying to sign a band for 3 months, so I was moving and running. I wanted to get it done, so I'd found a band called The Darkness that I was trying to sign. Max and I'd found it, and I wanted to get that signed. So that first week we moved in. We changed it all around. We fired all those people. We brought the whole company in. We signed The Darkness on that second week, and then which is quite funny because that came with a signing party for £12,000, and Warner's weren't used to spending 12 grand on signing. So, you know, we had coaches and leather and quill pens, and we did it at the Embassy Club, and the press thing was amazing. So you turn everything into an opportunity. And within that first period of East West, we changed the name of the company to Atlantic because no one knew who East West were. Max and I found a young singer-songwriter called James Blunt, who came in and played us some songs that were just amazing. We went to the pub and then we carried on drinking and talking for 6 hours, and he was signed originally to a wing of the American company but had just been dropped, so we re-signed him.
So just so that people understand how that can work in that practical sense. So did James Blunt bring his own demos in, or somebody?
Yeah, I got a phone call from the agent, who's a Boswell, a really old friend, another phone call from the publisher. There's this young guy, he's amazing, he's guitarist, singer-songwriter. I had a kind of James Taylor infatuation at the time, so I was specifically looking for a solo male singer-songwriter. At that point there weren't any. Part of my A&R thing is looking, if there isn't a three-piece duet boy band, that's what we look for. If there isn't a one-legged, you know, we always look for areas culturally of things that there wasn't. At that time there wasn't a English solo male singer-songwriter.
So you thought there was a gap?
There's a gap.
And somehow radio would play.
And I was looking for that. And James came in and we sat and chatted, and he was brilliant, and he played the songs and he was brilliant. So I spoke to...
So he played the songs live?
He came in with his guitar and played them in the office.
Yeah.
Best way. I mean, and if you've got great songs, I mean, those were great songs. So we did that, and then he was kind of signed to Elektra in America. They were closing Elektra. No one in America really wanted it. He had a production deal. He's an amazing songwriter. He had a great team in America. The team in America looking after him were fantastic. So they came and found us, and then we went, this is great, we'll get involved with the rest of the world. And that's what we did.
Yeah.
And then I found some records in the system. So I found a Jet album that hadn't been released. That was great. We put that out. We put the Sean Paul album out. That had been huge. That was hugely successful. So suddenly, you know, East West had gone from a £24 million business losing 4 or 5 million a year to a 35, 40 million pound business making 10, 15 million pound a year. And we turned that around in quite a short space of time. So I then went on to work at their sister company, which was the bigger company, which was Warner's, because I could work with Madonna and Green Day and the Chili Peppers, and you know, so I spent the last 4 years of my corporate world at Warner Brothers as the MD of Warner's, delivering Madonna to Maidstone for the Radio 1 Big Weekend. You know, that was quite a hoot. Or signing Niles Barkley and having a #1 record all around the world, biggest single of the year with Crazy.
So with Niles Barkley and Crazy, again, how did that come about? How did you actually hear that song to start with?
I was looking for a head of A&R because I just joined Warner's from from Atlantic. I left. Max became the MD of Atlantic, which is exactly right. He was growing up. He's 12 years younger than me. We'd have lost him, so it was great to make Max head. And I wanted to go and be the MD of Warner Brothers.
Yes.
I wanted to work with Tom Waddy in America. I wanted to work with all those big American artists. And so in the context of finding that talent and developing that talent was really crucial. With Niles, I was looking for a head of A&R. A really old friend of mine called Josh Deutsch that I'd worked with on an act called Ween before, was amazing. He was a great A&R man. So I flew him into London to see if he wanted to be my head of A&R. He said, I can't work in London, but during that process, it was kind of, what would you sign? If I was to make head of A&R, what would you sign? He was kind of keen, so he whipped out a 3-track demo, put on a song, and that was Crazy. Boom, 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 da-da-da-da-da. You know, that song came on. So he didn't he didn't want the job because he didn't want to work in London, but we did a deal. He started his own label in North America. I signed Niles Barkley for the world outside North America for quite a lot of money. He signed it in North America relatively cheaply, but but he then started working with Atlantic in North America, so it was all tied in worldwide, and then it became a huge success. And then you know, biggest selling song of the year, and then at Warner's we signed. I had a great A&R team. Rosemary was great. Paul Brown signed Pendulum. I got into all kinds of trouble for spending 300 grand on a dodgy little drum and bass act, and that Pendulum album did nearly 800,000. We signed an amazing 3-string guitarist from America who just had a heart attack, and all the American record execs thought I was crazy spending £250,000 on this blues guitarist who was in his 60s. He was C6 Steve. That album did 600,000. Yeah. So you know, you look at places where there aren't things, and you have a belief in your conviction, and off you go.
But in the end, you fell out with Warner's, or they fell out with you?
In the end, I disagreed with their digital strategy. I'd been there 8 years. I was 49. I didn't really want to carry on I didn't agree with the person who was running the company in England at the time, the chairman. I didn't agree with their strategy. There were some issues with Leo in America, with Edgar Bronfman. There were some issues, so I just thought, look, hey, it's fine. I'll exit stage left. I've done really well, So I did. They wanted me to carry on. They wanted to reduce my salary. I was on a royalty from all the mushroom years, so I was on a royalty from Muse and all the things I've done, which in a corporate world is quite difficult. So because I was part of the creative community and the production role and the executive production role, I got remunerated as a royalty payment, and that caused problems with all the lawyers in New York and various different things. It was just the right time to leave. I left. It was lovely. I was going to go sailing. I've got this dream to sail around the world on the same route Captain Cook took in 1790. But anyway, my kids dragged me to a gig, and I saw Temper Trap, and I saw Dougie came on stage and opened his mouth and sang Sweet Disposition, and I fell in love with him. And then I had the person who was going to help me invest when I was trying to buy Mushroom Records out of News Corp originally, an amazing man called Michael Watt, he owns Ronnie Scott's. He's my partner for the last 5 years. He put the finances up. And then Pat, who ran Infectious first time round, I was having a lunch with her, and on the second bottle of wine, it was, because I was like, I don't want to run a label, I don't want to deal with SRC codes, I don't want to run a budget, I'd like to have a label in cyberspace, I'd like not to have an office, I don't want to make physical records, that's already old, I just want it to be online, I want it to be what the label would look like in Blade Runner. And she was like, we'll do that, I can do that. So I had the band, I had the money, and I had Pat, and they started that in January, and by end of June, Sweet Disposition cruised into the top 10.
Infectious was reborn, in fact.
Infectious version 2 was reborn.
Yeah.
And then we signed I've had a lovely band in America that I love called Local Natives. That kind of was quite cool, and that first record did quite well. And then Tav rang me up and said, I heard Tav, who was Ash's manager, I heard he had a great new band. I rang him up actually and said, you've got a great new band, and he laughed and I laughed. So some of my kids went and saw them from the office. I was intrigued. There was no cymbals. The songs were quite good. I had my three kids living at home. I sent the 3 songs that Tav sent me to home. Those 3 songs were Tessellay, Breeze Blocks and Matilda. My teenage kids said, this is amazing, Dad, you've got to do this is fantastic. I've got a domestic A&R department, so Summer, who's 25, William, who's now 22, and Molly, as they grew up, they were my A&R department at home. Who told me the truth, honestly, and brutally sometimes. So I sent them the 3 songs, they loved it, and the next day I went down to Cambridge. I phoned Tab up in the morning and said, this is great, what we're doing. The day after that, we went to Cambridge to meet them. The following week they were playing at Heavenly, and I just fell in love with the songs. And it was Tav had a bad experience with Universal on a band I won't name. He'd had a bad experience with the Ting Tings at Sony, where Sony hadn't behaved quite correctly, and he didn't want to go into Warner's when I wasn't there for various different reasons. So he didn't want to deal with the 3 majors. So he brought it to me and we signed it, and that band was All J, and that was the 4th band we signed to Infectious.
Sold over 1 million albums in the end.
First album's done 1.2 million albums now. This new album's out 5 weeks ago, still it's number 4 in America. It's top 5 in 14 countries, number 1 in England. Yeah. We're trying to do 2 million albums. And then with Infectious, we signed Drenge. It was just amazing, like a feral rock band. I signed I love a band called These New Puritans. Jack is just a genius, an amazing talent. A Steve Reich of the 28th century. He's brilliant. So it's a kind of healthy collection of things I love. And commercial, there's an amazing band called Superfood, a great new act called DC Death Race. And now, 5 years in, the irony of all this is I've just sold the company back to BMG. So a new version of BMG Rights, not the old record label. New team, run by Hartwig in Germany, and really good people. The direction they want to go is right. They've got a lot of work to do if they want to be a record label, but their heart's in the right place and the belief's there. And so we'll see. So there's somewhat ironic that I sold Infectious 2 back to the company who trained me and started my career, 40 years ago.
Things are always changing, aren't they? And
embrace change, moving, changing, movement and things changing. Change is the most important thing in life, and you have to embrace it.
We talked about earlier about the parallels between football and music, and it's so true. The football team is always changing. The same in music, you cannot stand still because music changes, the structure of the business changes, and of course the people move around.
Well, when I started, there were, typewriters with carbon paper, telexes, no telephones, just an album. You know, and now we're in the street. You know, I do quite a lot of industry things. So I'm chairman of the charts, the official chart company, and the Brits Trust and what have you. And you know, I help bring streaming into the charts. We're just trying to work out how to bring streaming into the album charts. I really love the politics of the business as well, and trying to get, you know, all the government grant money for artists to tour overseas and what have you. So, you know, the digital landscape's really important, and streaming is a really positive thing for everybody.
And the important thing is, you're still enjoying yourself, you're still moving forward. I guess you're still learning all the time.
All the time, all the time, yeah. Constantly learning, constantly embracing change. And to be honest, the fact that I'm still in the sweet shop, in the toy shop, you know, playing with the toys after nearly 38 years in music. It's Confucius once said, if you make your hobby your work, if you make your hobby your job, you never have to work a day in your life.
Yeah.
And I've tried to follow that really, and I just love what we do. And I'm very, very lucky to be in a position to work with the people we work with.
Korda, it's been great. Thanks very much for coming to Cherry Red TV.
Thanks.
And maybe be a part 2 of the Korda March.
Maybe one day. Yeah. Well, on the boat when I come back from Australia.
Okay.
Really. Great.
And thank you everyone out there for watching Cherry Red TV. And we do a few more in this series to see how it goes. So watch out for those as well. And I hope we see you all again soon. Goodbye.